Welcome back to my channel, or to my channel if you are new here. My name is Haley and I talk about books, I read books, I love books. And today is no different. We're going to be talking about my wrap up for March. Before we get into the wrap up though, I wanted to preface this by saying that I have decided to kind of do my wrap up a little bit differently and talk about my books that I've read throughout the month. And so these are just going to be clips of me talking about each of the books because I feel like I give a better explanation of them when I have finished them and they're like fresh in my mind. You know what I mean? With that being said, we're going to go back to the past and talk about the first book that I read in March, which was The God in the Woods. Is primarily surrounding the missing case of this girl named Barbara, who's from this rich family that owns this camp that our characters are at. So basically it's surrounding a summer camp, and years prior her brother had went missing, and so you're kind of trying to figure out why her brother went missing and then why she went missing years later. And it's a really fascinating and kind of twisty type of story. You're following multiple different points of views. All of the characters are somehow twisted into the story in one way, shape, or form. More than anything, I loved the mystery of it. It does read kind of like literary fiction in a way, and the writing is super like good. I have no complaints about the writing. I think that it was just super well done. I will say that this book, it's really long, honestly, and I knew that going into it, but the page count is probably right where it needs to be at almost like 500 pages. Something that I don't particularly like in other books is when we're kind of bouncing all over the timelines, and you do get that in this, and there's definitely points of view that you only get in certain timelines, and I didn't hate that in this, which I think can attest to the writing and the way that it's set up, because I definitely have found myself hating books just because I don't like how much it bounces around from timeline to timeline. So I do really appreciate that. I think that it was well done overall. Moving on to the ending of the book, and this is probably like my least favorite part, is I didn't particularly love how the book ended. I don't know how I would have wanted it to end, but the way that the mysteries kind of wrapped up and what actually happened to these children, I didn't particularly love, and I wanted more from my time with this book. If I'm gonna spend 500 pages reading about this mystery that's taking place, I want there to be something that's really kind of anchoring the story down and solidifying it as being just like well overall. And when the mystery concluded, that just wasn't it for me. So overall, I did really enjoy The God in the Woods, and I definitely think that it's a top contender for my favorite book of March so far. Perfect Fit is a workplace romance. We're following a male and a female, and it is frustrating because this book is written well, especially for a romance. It's definitely not something that I have to complain about as far as the writing. Something about my reading this month is not boding well when it comes to the way that characters are written, and these characters in this, we're following, what are their names? Josephine and Will, or Josie and Will, and they just fell flat. There's nothing about them that made me care or want to continue reading. I would have been okay DNFing this if it wasn't for the video, especially knowing that it's a romance and they're gonna live happily ever after, you know? I will say though that there's no third act breakup in this, and the actual like conflict in the third act is very much not to do with their relationship, which is really nice. And the way that that part of the story goes, I'm really happy that it took that turn. Relationship wise, these characters make sense, but I also don't particularly love the fact that we're only following the girl in this. So it's only her point of view. It's not dual POV, and when I pick up a romance, I want it to be dual POV, and that just wasn't it with this one. So that was a big kind of bummer, honestly, because I don't really get to see his side of the romance except through her eyes, and I don't particularly love that in romances. If I were to have to actually rate this, it's like a 2-star, easy, and something that I really just wish I would have enjoyed more. I do kind of want to check out this author's other books because maybe I'll like those more, and it's just these characters that I didn't like in this, and hopefully that's the case. The third book that I read this month is Open Water, and I am so glad that I read this, honestly. This is a book following a relationship told through the man's eyes, and we're also just getting a lot of his commentary on the world and things that he loves and enjoys, and it's a really interesting book. The writing is so simplistic and so beautiful and tender in a way, and it's so strategic in the way that he writes this book. It is definitely a book that I don't think I've ever read anything quite like this. I just am so glad that I finally picked this up because I have gotten this from the library about a year or so ago, and I was gonna read it and I didn't get to it and I returned it, and then I decided to get it again, and I'm so glad that I read it at this point in time because it just feels right that I read it now versus when I originally had gotten it. And I can't really explain why, but it does. Towards the end, the way that the book kind of went and the character experienced life was not something that I was expecting, and I guess a lot of times when I pick up a book, this is mild spoilers by the way, but a lot of times when I pick up a book that's a romance, I'm expecting a happy ending. I'm expecting for the characters to experience life together by the end and be kind of one. And that wasn't actually the case with this, and that really hindered my experience of it because I wasn't expecting it. And then on top of that, we are getting, especially the last, like, I'd say 4 chapters or so, we're not even getting romance in that. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's just not something that I was expecting. And I was expecting, especially with the majority of this book being about the romance, I wasn't expecting it to kind of diverge into other topics. For this to be a debut novel as well is just insane to me, and something that I definitely want to return back to. I want to physically own, I want to annotate it, I want to experience this book again, and so I'm really glad that I picked it up. Something else that I really love about this book is the way that our main character just experiences media, especially Black media, when he's talking about music and film and art, and the way that he the way that he takes it in is so interesting to me, and something that I don't really read about much when it comes to characters. Even when a character in the book loves art and talks about art, it's not in the way that this character does, and the way that he speaks on it and reflects on it and takes it in is just really interesting to me, and something that I really loved. I loved seeing and hearing his, or well, I guess really just reading his perspective. The next book that I actually finished this month is a graphic novel, and something that I really enjoyed, and that's The Daughters of Wise, I believe is how you pronounce it. I'm thinking like Wise, like W-I-S-E, but it's Y-S. I'm thinking was the point of it, you know? This book is actually based off of folklore. I believe it's Celtic folklore, but I am not really sure where it said it. The Daughter of Wise is based on an ancient Breton folk tale. Many different versions of this legend survive. Okay, so it is based off of a folk tale. And in this, we're following 2 sisters, one who has kind of took a turn for the worse and is kind of an evil being, if you will. And then the other sister is more like rebellious against their father, who is a king and doesn't really want nothing to do with their city or ruling it, especially the way that he does. This is definitely fantasy, but there are some kind of like horror themes in it, and I definitely really enjoyed that. I wasn't expecting it, and the way that these characters progress throughout the story is really interesting. The ending was kind of interesting. I would have loved to seen this animated. I think that it would make such a good animated series or movie or something. I just really enjoyed it. This is honestly one of the first graphic novels that I've read in a really long time where I'm actually feeling things as I was reading it, and I definitely think that that contributed to my enjoyment of this more than anything. There was a moment that I tabbed in this that I just really enjoyed. So the older sister, who is the top one, is kind of rebelling against her father and her society and the way that things are ruled, and she's talking to a local man who is part of like the poor, and she asks him about this fish. Her father has granted this man a fish, just one fish, but the catch is that he can't eat more than half of the fish, because if that's the case, then it won't replenish for him to consume the next day. And so he every day has to catch this fish and eat half of it and then return the other half so that he can have food for the next day. And she's talking to him and she goes, "How can you kill him every day?" And he goes, "We live by devouring those we love. How can we help it? They're the ones within closest reach." And I was like, okay, sir. Something about that line really hit me. There was another one, but I didn't tab it. But this is definitely something that I would like to return to. I'll show you the page. It's this top one right here that I'm talking about. Hopefully you can see that. And I just really think that this book was well done and something that I'm really glad that I finally picked up. I've had this out from the library for a couple months now and I need to return it now, but I'm so glad that I picked it up and I read it and I enjoyed it more than anything. So with that being said, that is The Daughters of Wise. Beautiful World, Where Are You follows a group of 4 individuals, 2 men and 2 women, and we're following their life and their relationships and their friendships and the way that their lives are kind of intertwined with one another. My biggest problem with this book is the characters. Despite this being a literary fiction and something where you're really just following these characters and not much is happening besides that, it fell flat in that area quite a bit. The characters were unlikable, and that's not something that necessarily puts me off from a book, but it is something that when you're reading a literary fiction, I don't want to have to read about unlikable characters as much as I had to with this book. The first half of it, I would say, started out really strong. I was intrigued, I wanted to read more, and I was just really loving the writing of this more than anything. And I will say that continued throughout the entirety of this book. But as far as the characters and learning about them, and as you experience their life with them more, you realize that they're actually insufferable. Every single one of them, and somehow it makes sense because they're all kind of connected and friends, and that makes sense because insufferable people love insufferable people. I didn't want to read more of them, and if I wasn't reading this for a video, then I would have put this down immediately. This book was already something that I had picked up and put down several times, and then I picked it for a video and finished reading it, and honestly it just was not it for me. Not to say that there weren't moments that I did enjoy. I think one of my favorite things about this book is the letters written between the 2 women, and you get those interspersed between chapters, and it's a really interesting way to kind of get into their head that's not their outer world. It deals with a lot of different subjects, this book does. You're talking about religion, you're talking about politics, you're talking about just living in general and life and choosing your path, and it's a really interesting book in that sense. But the way that you're following these characters and the way that they're telling their story and living their life is just something that personally I didn't enjoy. It really just was a letdown altogether. The Girl from the Sea is the next book that I read this month. This is a book that I wasn't really planning on reading, but my sister got it from the library and she read it and she's like, you need to read this. And it was already on my TBR, so I just went ahead and read it. So we're following our main character Morgan, who is dealing with her sexuality, and she has this plan of waiting until she moves away and goes to college to come out of the closet. And that kind of goes off the rails when we get introduced to Kelty, who is a Selkie, which is a mythical being that transforms into a seal, and then every 7 years she gets to walk on land as a human, and then she ends up kissing Morgan, and that allows her to walk on land for like multiple days. I don't really know the mythology of a Selkie, but I enjoyed this. I think one of my favorite things about this graphic novel is the fact that you can see so well how the author handles these characters and their relationships with each other. Just something as simple as the way that Morgan's body language changes depending on who she's around and how she's feeling is really well done. The friend group in this, although it is a bit of a cliche at times, does feel very authentic and very real. I also just really love the juxtaposition between these two characters and how much they're opposites, but you can very much see the opposites attract. This is such a good graphic novel and something that I can definitely recommend for younger age kids as well as older. My sister's 12, I'm 23, and we both really enjoyed it. So I would say that this is something that no matter what age you are, you can really pick up and really enjoy. Yeah, it was just a fun time. It's definitely something that kind of set off the summer vibes as well, which I really enjoyed, and I am actually really glad that I finally got this read because it's been on my Goodreads TBR for a while. The next book that I read and finished this month is 9 Perfect Strangers. This is a fiction book that is following 9 perfect strangers, and we're at a luxury resort where they basically are trying to get away from their life. The owner of this resort and the person in charge, she is kind of unconventional, and the way that she is running things is unconventional and something that they constantly are kind of questioning and trying to figure out what's going on. It's really just about that. The entire time you're just like, what's gonna happen? What are we here for? And then that was kind of why I didn't really love this book in the end, because nothing really happens to the point where I'm like, oh, okay, this was worth 450 pages, because it just felt okay. The one thing that really carried this book more than anything is the characters, and I think that was kind of the purpose. And honestly, the other book that I read from this author, Apples Never Fall, that is also kind of very similar. The characters are the ones carrying the book. It's not, there's not much else going on. So overall, the book was just kind of okay. It's about how I thought I was going to feel about it. So I guess I'm not mad at it, but also there's always that small hope that it's just a good book and something that you'll enjoy. It's definitely something that I can imagine myself thinking about over time and just thinking, oh, you know, I remember this part of this book, and like it's just gonna be like fragments of this book in my mind, and I'm just gonna think, oh yeah, and then move on. You know, it's not anything that I would say is spectacular or, you know, worth the time of reading it. So it is what it is, but I finished it. Give Me Your Hand is following our main character Kit and how her life is kind of intertwined with another character named Diane. We're following then and now chapters of her in high school with Diane as her lab partner in science, and then how they kind of challenge each other in high school, and then how her life is kind of thrust back into Diane's when Diane ends up coming and working at the same lab as her when they're older. And throughout high school and her adult life, she's been keeping the secret of Diane's, and she is kind of overwhelmed by it, and you're following her trying to deal with that and also deal with the fact that Diane's back in her life. And the story is really just about Kit and Diane and their relationship and how they kind of challenge each other and help each other throughout their life. So my problem with this book is that I just didn't like it altogether. It just wasn't something that I particularly enjoyed reading. It is a fast-paced psychological type of thriller, but nothing really felt like it happened. Although the story was progressing and there was things happening, it just didn't feel like nothing was happening. I was kind of bored the entire time, and ultimately I just wanted more from the story, and I just was not getting that. Something else that I didn't particularly love was how flat all of the characters felt. None of the characters felt important. Even our main character Kit, even Diane, none of them felt immensely important or like I cared what was going to happen to them. And that obviously is something that a book should have, because if you don't at least want to know what's happening to these characters, then why are you reading it? So ultimately this just fell flat in every way possible, but I am glad that I got it off my physical TBR, and I will say that. Something is Killing the Children is a comic book series. This is volume 1. We are following a couple different characters in this town where something is killing the children, and you are trying to like figure that out along with everybody else. You know it's some type of monster, but nothing more than that really. And we have a character who is a monster hunter, and then we have a kid who experienced his friends getting killed by this monster, and he is trying to help her. And you have these people in town who are trying to figure out what's going on. There's a guy who had a sister who has died, he believes, and you're really just following these characters as they're trying to figure out what's going on, and that's all that really happens in volume 1. As far as my enjoyment of this, I would say that this is one of the more enjoyable comic book and graphic novel series that I have read. It keeps you on your toes. It's something that you want to continue reading, and it's something that I personally am going to continue because I had a really good time with this, and it's obviously a quick read because it's a comic book. And yeah. The Underground Railroad follows our main character Cora. The main story is that we're following Cora as she is trying to escape slavery, and we're kind of going on her journey with her. This is the type of book that I feel should be required reading. It is just objectively a good book. There is nothing about this book that makes me go, this is a terrible book, this is not something that I wouldn't want to read. It is something that should be read by everyone, and I'm glad that I finally got to it and got to read it. I don't really have any other complaints or any other thoughts on it. Yeah, just read it. Just pick it up. The writing in this book is by far one of the best pieces of writing that I have found. There's not anything about it that makes me dislike it or makes me think that someone else would dislike it. The writing is just very much objectively good. This book as a whole is objectively good. The fact that we're talking about something that should be talked about and something that should be publicized and talked about extensively and not shied away from at all, because it is something that is important, so that one, hello, history doesn't repeat itself, and two, that you are aware of these things that have happened and why it's important that it doesn't happen again. It's great. The characters in this, every single one of them just felt so well-rounded, and never once did I think that they felt unbelievable or unrealistic, and that was something that I'm really glad that I also was able to enjoy about this book and take away from it. So as a whole, pick it up. I think it's great. And on to the next book. The Dreamers is the next book that I read this month. I had been anticipating reading this for some time and kept putting it off because I was nervous that it wasn't going to be something that I fully enjoyed, and I am just glad that I finally got to it. I will say the first part is really slow moving, but as it progresses, it gets better and you're more intrigued to see what's happening, what's going on. And even by the end, I don't feel like you get a whole lot of answers. This book is a pandemic type of novel. We are following this town and some of the people that live within it. And these people are part of this pandemic that's happening just in this town. And what's happening is some of the citizens are going under a deep sleep. They won't wake up. They're still alive, but they're just like basically sleeping. There is quite a few different characters that we're following, some who end up in this deep sleep, some who are just experiencing it around them. I would have appreciated this book more if we would have dove more into the why of what's happening and what was happening in these characters' dreams. I would have been intrigued to see the dreams themselves, but instead what we're really experiencing is the experience of this pandemic towards these characters and what's happening with these characters. Also, the writing in this book was something that I was really happy with and something that I'm glad that was good. The writing really drove this book. The way that the author tells the story and the dedication that she puts into the storytelling of this, I would say is really good, and it shines through. Finlay Donovan is killing it. Has to be one of my new favorite mysteries. I had such a fun time with this. I'm just like itching to get back into this world and read the rest of the books in the series, but I haven't yet for the sake of my sanity and also just having to read other books. But I am very interested in continuing the series. This follows a mom. She's dealing with the fact that she's recently divorced and her husband had cheated on her, and now he's trying to fight for custody of her children. And she's also trying to publish a new book. Even though her books don't sell that much, they make enough money for her to live a decent life, and she's just struggling for money. And then one day in a Panera, a person overhears her talking to her literary agent about the plot of her new book, and the person mistakes her for being a person who kills people for hire. And so she is now kind of dealing with that, and it is just like a fun time. I absolutely loved it, and I'm ready for more of these books. I'm ready to read more of these books. So that is Finlay Donovan is killing it, because she is for sure killing it. Killing something, that's possibly for sure. The next book that I read in March is Star. This is a very short book. I read it all in one day, and I am a slow reader, so the fact that I read this all in one day says a lot. I really am okay with this book. It's just something that I read, honestly. In this book, we're following our main character, who is a celebrity. He's an actor, and it's basically just talking about his time on set and the life that he's living. He's 23, turning 24 in this book, and he's just kind of had it with his career. He's been working nonstop, and he is just struggling. It's very much a stream of conscious type of writing. He's just yapping basically, and you're just here listening, and it's interesting enough, but it's not something that I think I would ever really recommend to anyone. Definitely don't pick this up if you don't like books with celebrities, or if you don't like stream of conscious writing. I have at least one other book by this author on my Goodreads TBR, and I'll probably give it a chance, but if the writing is similar to this, I don't know if I'll love it, because I like stream of conscious writing, but I love being with that narrator for a really long time, and this just wasn't really long enough for me to really care about the narrator and his life, or what he was thinking, or how he was living, and it was just okay. I'll leave it at that. The Mysterious Case of the Alperton Angels is a mixed media mystery type of book. It is told strictly through mixed media. You're getting text messages and emails and transcripts of interviews between our main character and people she's interviewing and people she's trying to get information out of. It is a very much like fast-paced type of book, because you're just reading email or transcript after transcript, and it's just like a fun time. That's what this book has going for it. I will also say that the actual case that you're following is very complex. We're following our main character trying to discover and uncover more secrets that have to do with the Alperton Angels, which was a cult that was 18 years prior to when this book takes place in 2021. And essentially she's writing this book for the sake of a series that's coming out that she was invited to write a book for, where each case is uncovering new evidence and also detailing the case to new fans while still having something exciting and new for the older fans of whatever the case is that the authors are writing about. I think one of my favorite things about this is how complex the story is. It is very much a lot that she's uncovering and a lot that's getting figured out, and you're really just on the edge of your seat. You're not really getting too much information throughout the book. It is very much a building the case type of vibe, and then everything comes collapsing down towards the last 50 to 100 pages. Besides the actual case and the way that this book is told, nothing else was really intriguing to me or anything that I felt was extraordinary. I've since found out that this author does a lot of mixed media in her books, and I have another one, The Pill, which it shows on here, on my shelves, so I do want to get to that at some point, and hopefully I'll enjoy that more, because the actual case and the story in this I wasn't absolutely a fan of, and I wanted more as far as that. I also am not a fan of the fact that it's told strictly through mixed media. I would have much rather loved a traditional book format and then these emails and transcripts kind of thrown in, which that's not what we got. Overall though, I had a really fun time, and I think that this is definitely a book that I will continuously think about. This book feels very similar to Night Film in the way that the case that you're following is intriguing enough, but it's really the mixed media and the characters that pull the story together, and you get to kind of care a little bit more about that more than anything. But even with that being said, I cared less about these characters, probably because there was no traditional book format. The Last 8 is a YA sci-fi following the last 8 people on Earth who happen to all be teenagers after an alien invasion, and you're following them as they are trying to, one, kind of figure out what's going on. The character that's considered our main character is alone for 6 months, and then one day randomly hears a radio signal with a code message saying basically, I'm at Area 51, come find me. And she gets there, and there's 7 other people there who happen to be survivors, and as far as we know, they are the only other 7 people alive. So basically they are just trying to figure out about these aliens and what's happening and how to save themselves and save the Earth. Overall, it was just an okay book. It wasn't anything that was super spectacular or anything that really will stand out and stand the test of time for me. I definitely think I would have enjoyed it if I had read it when I was younger, and this was kind of like the first sci-fi I was reading, because as of right now it's just something that I read, and I've read better sci-fi, and I don't even read that much sci-fi to begin with. And there you have it. Those are the books that I read in March. Thank you so much for watching this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, do all of that stuff if you want to. If you don't, it is what it is, and I will catch you on the flip side. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.